Sometimes I'm really led by my mind, my critical thinking, my cognitive aspect. Sometimes I'm really led with my heart and my emotions. Is this ultimately about kind of creating space and building trust with what that is?
Yeah, I think that, yeah, building a relationship with that part of us. I think that that's the case in relationships with people outside of ourselves. We're not necessarily thinking, I'm building trust with you. No, I'm just spending time with you and being in connection in a loving, kind of appreciative way. And trust is the byproduct of that.
Mental health, emotional health, physical health, deeper understanding, actionable takeaways to improve your quality of life. We're the Level Up Guys.
Even guys can have emotionally literate conversations, and we're the guys that are going to prove it.
All right, here we go. We are back. We are the Level Up Guys. Today we're talking about self-trust. You're looking at Jarrett. You're listening to Billy. I'm the host of the Level Up Guys. Jarrett is a mental health professional. I'm a yoga Pilates teacher. I've owned a studio here in the coast of North Carolina for just about a decade. Today's episode is a little bit more research-based. We had to do some educating on ourselves, especially me, going down this deep dive. So we're talking about self-trust. Now, Jarrett, I know self-trust on a superficial level. I trust myself to be able to, drive a car and handle my business and all that. But on a much deeper level, like a deep dive into what we're doing here for this podcast, like what would be your elevator pitch for what is, the definition of self-trust?
Yeah. So I think if I had to go elevator pitch, I'd probably fail, but I'm just going to talk it out and we'll get somewhere with it. And actually, it's interesting that you say elevator pitch because with an elevator, you kind of go up and down floors, right? And I think that self-trust is about like metaphorically taking the elevator down and seeing what the truth is inside yourself and what you're being called to do. Now, we have all kinds of ways of hiding that from ourselves or blocking it out, right? When like it's like that thing when we kind of know what we have to do or what we're being called to do, but distract ourselves or, find ways to kind of numb that truth or the experiences that are coming. That truth that is kind of deep down, that place of knowing is self-trust. I think self-trust, here's the elevator pitch. I think self-trust is knowing that what is authentically true for us is the path we should follow and having faith that we are capable of following it. Bam! I got there.
Nailed it. All right. On the next episode, see you guys next time. So you mentioned something that really resonated with me. You mentioned that there's pillars of like what it actually means. When I named my studio Rebel Yoga and Pilates, I wanted to kind of define like what that meant. So I have the studio 5 little infographics, which are the pillars of our rebellion. What are we actually rebelling against? Like, what's the point? So tell me, like, what are the pillars of self-trust?
Yeah. So this one I'm going to borrow from Emily Romero. She has a book, You Can Trust Yourself, but she also has, is featured on podcasts and things like that. So I'm going to borrow a little bit here, but I found these to be true as I reflected on them. So she says, and she actually labels this as a compass, and the compass imagery really resonates with me. Like my next tattoo is going to be a compass. So the 4 points of the compass, she says, are of self-trust are first radical honesty, and radical honesty with ourselves, right? If you think about it, though, like you don't trust somebody who lies to you. Period. Like that's just obvious, right? So when we lie to ourselves or we kind of push the truth away, we actually start to chip away at our self-trust. And so radical honesty with ourselves of like, what is my truth? Like truly deep down, what is my truth? Is the first pillar, or she would say like point of the compass.
That's like a really hard one to get to. That could take a while to really like dismantle all maybe the illusions in our brain and all our belief systems that we've had built up throughout the years to really get to that fundamental.
Yeah, so let's come back to that because there are some things that you can do to kind of get to that place, but let's come back to that. So the second point on her compass is keeping promises or following through, right? So similarly, you would not trust somebody who flakes on you or who breaks promises with you, right? Same goes for ourselves. So when we have a sense of like, this is what I am being called to do, or saying, or even just like saying to other people, like, I'm going to do this thing, I'll be there or whatever. If we see ourselves as somebody who breaks promises, even to others or to ourselves, then we're going to be chipping away at self-trust. So that's number two. The third one she says is regulation, being like using skills, strategies, or whatever to calm your nervous system. Now, if you think about it also, right, like going back to this, perspective, and as I was reflecting on it, like, who do we, like, we don't trust people, or no, let me say it this way. We tend to trust people who take care of us reliably, right? So when we calm our nervous system, that is a form of us taking care of us. So again, that would be like building self-trust, right? Like, I'll take care of you, nervous system. I'll help you feel calm. As almost as if the nervous system is, a separate or kind of a part of us, right? And some people might, it's been talked about. Some people would describe like, when our nervous system gets activated, that's kind of like the childhood experience resurfacing kind of through like cell memory, through all of that stuff. So it's like taking care of like the child you when we calm our nervous system. So again, that's like a way to build trust. And then the fourth one that she says is knowing yourself deeply. We don't trust strangers, right? Like, if we don't know somebody, we don't necessarily just jump into trusting them. Or if we do, there's some part of us that is like on guard or whatever, or maybe hopeful that we can trust them. But there's like some part of us that knows like, I shouldn't trust a stranger, right? They have to kind of earn my trust or prove they're trustworthy. So knowing yourself deeply is kind of a piece of that, one of the points of this 4-point compass, or the pillars or building blocks of self-trust.
So knowing oneself deeply is going to circle me back to that first one, radical honesty. Let's circle back to that one.
Yeah.
That seems like a tough one. It seems like a tough pill to swallow. I know for myself, sometimes I have a hard time making decisions, like pulling the trigger on things. Sometimes I'll spend a lot of time in my mind thinking about something, analysis paralysis, and not really trusting my intuition and my experience to be able to say, this is what we're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think what you're describing is like the anxious part of our brain is, basically trying to like recall what is the right thing to do, like trying to memorize the right thing to do in any given situation, or might be like, what did this person do? Right? Even though like we can know they haven't lived the life that I have, maybe aspired to something that I aspire to, but they don't have maybe even the benefit of all the history of experiences that I can bring to this choice. Right. But so like and I do this too, and I think a lot of people do, is like our place of self-trust doesn't come from our head, right? It's more about sinking down into our body. But I think that you're right that like, weighing pros and cons is another great example of, not being guided by self-trust. Not that any of these things are bad for information seeking, like we can gather information and then also kind of go to that place of like, what is right for me? What is true for me? But it's really when we're weighing those things more heavily than our trust in ourselves, So, but yeah, and the one of the pieces of research that I kind of drew upon for this episode was The Perfectionist's Guide to Losing Control. The author, Catherine Schaffler, sorry, basically says like when you aren't coming from a place of self-trust, you kind of need whatever it is that you're doing to work out, right? Like whether that's a job or a creative project or a relationship or whatever, because there's almost this lack of faith, as I said before, in one's own ability to pivot if something isn't working and succeed regardless, right? Like, so self-trust isn't about finding the path that is, empty of mistakes or void of mistakes. We actually are more likely to encounter mistakes on a path of self-trust. Do you have any guesses as to why? It's okay if you don't. This kind of came as like a light bulb moment for me when I found out about it, but like,
yeah, I'm not sure. Tell me.
So when we are coming from a place of self-trust, we're likely going to expand our world beyond what we just know. Like if we believe I'm capable of pivoting or figuring it out, ultimately, I'm going to be taking more risks and doing more things that are unknown to me. And just by the nature of that, of course, we're not going to know how to do things. Of course, we're going to try things that don't work or whatever and make mistakes. But like the self-trust is less about finding the path of least mistakes. It's more about no matter what I encounter, I believe that I am capable of getting through it. Doesn't mean there's not going to be frustration, doesn't mean that there isn't moments of difficulty, but curiosity and creativity will trump those things.
So would it then be true to say that through practice and experience, you'd then nurture that trust in yourself a little bit more? Like I know for me,
Yeah.
I'm an avid motorcycle rider. I love it. I study it. I read it. I'm all about it. And I trust myself to ride my bike. And if I'm out there and something happens, if I'm a little bit too hard on the brakes or something, and I have like a little scary moment, I can go right back to that. I don't lose my trust in myself because I know, oh, something happened. There's a little speed bump in the operations, but I go
Yeah.
right back to it. And that feels like because I practiced it, I'm really passionate about it. I'm all about it. And that little mistake or that accident that happened along the way doesn't erode my own belief in myself to be able to execute this thing.
That's a great connection to it. Yes, 100%, right? And I really like how you describe you are anchored in in trusting yourself about it, right? You can move into a motorcycle riding experience where something isn't going well, or like you have a little moment of skidding, or whatever it is. But it's not eroding at your self-trust because because of the resilience, right? The place that you return to, the place where you're anchored. And that anchoring does happen, I think, over time, right? Like you have done a lot of research. I know that you have taken classes with experts about how to, be the best motorcycle rider and safest motorcycle rider. Man, that's hard to say a lot of times, motorcycle rider. And so, yeah, like it's become part of what is instinctual to you, right? And yeah, so I think that the practice is a huge part of it, like the practice and maintenance, right? Like if you, for example, if you didn't ride your motorcycle for 10 years and then got back on, you would probably still have a lot of the muscle memory, but maybe not all of the self-trust that you have if you only stopped riding for 2 days, right? But you could rebuild it probably more quickly because you have the muscle memory. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It brings me back to the podcast we just released with Lexi Moulet. It was a
Mm.
great one. If you haven't listened to that one, at the end of this one, bounce over there and binge it. Talking about boundaries, and she was sharing this really great story about one of her girlfriends having to set a boundary. And at first, it was really hard, really awkward. Then she practiced it, and it kind of feels like she had more self-trust that she could verbalize and have the right emotion and to be able to communicate her needs in a a loving, kind, receptive way.
Yeah. And right. And she talks about it with practice, right? And this angle of self-trust even brings me back to another piece of imagery or I don't know, metaphor that you had said some other time. I don't remember what the episode was, but the listeners will recognize it. Like if you've been eating for however many years, right? If you bite your tongue, you're not like, ah, I'm such a terrible eater, right? Like people bite their tongue every once in like, and it's not like you've lost your trust in your ability to eat or to like eat without biting your tongue, right? It's just like that happened. Well, that did suck, right? Like that was painful or whatever, but there's like this almost automatic, I'll get through it and eat again, right? Like my tongue will be okay, right? And I will still be able to pursue food, right? Like coming and for that one, it's really easy, I think, for people, right? That's what makes it such a great example of like we are so anchored in our self-trust to be able to eat because it's like one of the things that we have been doing for the longest ever since we were born, right? And so and with like the most repetition even, right? At least 3 times a day, but when we're a baby, even more, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I mean, that's a really, really solid example of like um, practice over and over, right, is going to help you anchor yourself in self-trust, in whatever the area is, more than if you were to, you know, not practice or not have experience or whatever.
Yeah, I wonder if the next pillars in her next book, one of those pillars might include like failures built into it, because the failure of biting your tongue, this is the reality. Like self trust doesn't mean flawless
Yeah.
or perfect or, yeah. It seems almost like self trust is an element of confidence, but kind of in
Mhm.
like a more subtle and maybe like in a deeper way of like a really knowing, a, like an internal knowing and an internal belief.
Yeah, like I think knowing, belief, faith, right? Like all of those kind of wrapped up into confidence. Like if those, three words plus confidence had a baby, I think that's what we're talking about here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It seems the more we talk about it in this podcast, it seems like it might be something that's lacking in today's culture, in today's society, and kind of synonymous with confidence. Like I'll say this in Pilates class or yoga class all the time. Confidence, I think, is something that's earned,
Mm.
not given. A lot of people have like a false bravado. I'll have it, you'll have it. If we're going into a situation, maybe we feel a little anxiety or insecurity, we might have this, confident aspect about us. But like true confidence, I think, is born from the repetition of doing and failing and keeping going and all of that. And you build it up like that from the bottom up.
Yeah, I mean, this podcast is a great example of struggling with and practicing embracing self-trust, for me at least,
Yeah.
right? Like, and I imagine for you too, but I don't want to speak for you. But like to jump on, hit record, with a microphone in front, have these topics that are somewhat researched, but also like incorporating some of my own experience and your own experience, and that includes failures, right, and successes and skills used to achieve those things, right? Like before we hit record today, right? I'm like, well, I got a lot of, this is something that I researched a lot, but I also like know deep down that I know a lot about it, right? Like just because I've worked so hard to have self-trust be a place that I come from, in my therapy sessions, with my therapist, it's a big thing that I work on, and the parts work, the inner parts work that I do. And so part of me is like just remembering whatever happens, I have the capacity to pivot and make this successful, regardless of whether you ask me a question about the research or you ask me a question about myself or whatever it is, right? Like I can just approach it with creativity and good listening and taking some breaths, right? Like that is part of, the channeling of self-trust.
So if you start to lose it a little bit and you want to reclaim that self trust, how is that different than someone else? Like there's an old saying, like it takes years and years to build up trust and then 2 seconds to be able to break it, right? If you're in a relationship with someone, loving relationship, and you trust each other and someone cheats, well, it's really hard to go back to that
Yeah.
thing. How do we, instead of that concept, how do we forgive ourselves or move past or reclaim, from like an authentic way, not that false confidence or false trust? How do we, bring ourselves back to trusting ourselves to be able to move forward and hit record and do the things we need to do?
Yeah, that is such an important question, right? Because I don't know that there's any adult who hasn't at some point abandoned themselves or their truth, right? Or betrayed themselves or betrayed somebody else. And like we can all find like, our anxious brain can find more than enough reasons to justify not trusting ourselves. So that's a really, really helpful question. And even before I answer it, I just want to highlight that I think, and this is, something that the author of the Perfectionist Guidebook that I mentioned before, I think would agree with, is that the people who trust themselves the most are the people who have lost trust with themselves most intensely and made the decision to gradually make their way back to their truth and to live from that place, right?
Mm.
So, like, if you are somebody who has lost your self-trust, great. You have the potential to be one of the most self-trusting people, even more so than somebody who hasn't lost it, right? So let me just put that out there as a framework before I even answer the question. So you mentioned like, if a partner cheats on somebody, right? There's that betrayal, a loss of trust. And I think that that's a really like with a partner, like that's a really helpful framework to think about it in terms of rebuilding self-trust, right? So like if two people decide, we're in a relationship and somebody cheated, but they decided that they wanted to work together to rebuild trust and, both people are in it. The person who was betrayed doesn't want, 100 balloons and to be taken out to expensive dinners. Like that's not what rebuilds their trust, right? Like it might feel nice in the moment, but actually I'm not sure that it makes a dent on the trust thing, right? It's the consistency of little demonstrations over a long period of time, not any one intense gesture or any one intense like act. Does that make sense?
It does, 100%. Yeah.
And I think that, or this is something that I agree with the author, that she says that no matter how well you succeed at something or perform on something or whatever, that alone does not necessarily earn you self-trust. You have to make the choice that my success, my performing well is a reflection of me being able to trust myself, right? You have to kind of assign that meaning of like, I'm collecting evidence for self-trust. And some of that evidence is this success. So, she said the way that she kind of puts it shortly is trust is a choice supported by action built over time. And I think that's a really nice mantra. Trust is a choice supported by action built over time. That kind of summarizes it nicely.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it.
Yeah.
I have a question about, is there any relation to seeking validation?
Yeah, say more. Yeah.
Yeah. I think most people, myself included, I ride this wave my whole entire life between not really caring what other people think and being an independent person and wanting to do what I do versus, man, I really want people to appreciate me and really like me. And, my mom and dad never said, hey, good job, Billy. So I want people to like say, hey, that was really great. That endless cycle of seeking validation. So I know for me, maybe this resonates with a lot of listeners. I want to say, I don't really care what people think, but I want to be loved. I want to be appreciated. Like, does that seeking validation, can that undermine our self-trust? Because we might make decisions to, I don't want to say people please, not to that extent.
Yeah.
But to be a part of the group, to be appreciated and liked and loved and admired and all those things we want.
Yeah. What is your first inclination of like, how would you answer that? And I'll share kind of my thoughts as well, but like, and it can even be, a brief yes or no, right?
Yeah. I know for me that a lot of the decisions that I've made in my life that have made me really happy and successful, there was a lot of people around me that told me that like it wouldn't work and it was a bad idea and I shouldn't do it. And there was also a lot of decisions that I made that they were absolutely right. It was a bad idea, but I felt good about doing me, doing my own thing instead of seeking that validation. So I think that built up my trust in myself where if I can do something that I really believe in, regardless of the external, and put that out into the world, I'll trust myself to do it again and again. Yeah. And this is, even with this podcast, like we have so many amazing like friends and family. And we're saying, hey, what do you guys think about all this stuff? And when it comes down to it, the level up guys, you and I need to trust ourselves to be able to say to the world, like, this is what we got. This is what we got. Instead of like formulating it in a sweet little package to be able to say like, oh, this will get the most clicks or this will get the most responses or whatever, like really trusting ourselves in a deep level instead of seeking the success or seeking the notoriety or seeking the validation. It seems like it might undermine for me, what I believe in my being to be true.
Yeah. Yeah. No, so just first right off the bat, I would say that I think I completely agree with you that the way that you first phrased the question was, does seeking external validation potentially chip away at self-trust when that is more heavily weighed. And as your answer kind of portrays from your personal experience, I would say yes, right? And it's, but I also think something important to remember is like, even when we are coming from a place of self-trust, we can still seek others' guidance. But it's, I think I said similar before, like it's as information gathering, right? It's not the decision maker. It's not the right answer, kind of in quotes, right? Or the right course of action, but it's information to decide, does that feel true for me when I check in with myself, right? In my authentic piece. So for example, you had brought up the podcast and doing what feels right to us and putting it out there and, saying like, this is what we got, right? And it could be that there could be situations where, or there even have been situations where you made a suggestion about how to capture people's attention, right? Here's what we got, and we want you to hear it, right? Like, so how, right? And so I think like even in those moments, what's true for you is I want people to hear this, right? And here's how I think, here's what resonates with me for how to achieve that. So even though it might align with getting other people to like the podcast or whatever, it still comes from a place of authentic you. Does that like that kind of decision making or course of action? Does that feel accurate, or did I like?
Yeah, I mean, what you're really pointing out to me is it's not a binary black and white thing.
Yeah.
Like most things, it's a bouquet of things to unravel and navigate.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, so and that's I think the thing that is so easy to forget, not just the black and white thinking or binary aspect of it, but that like it's not a bad thing to seek or even want validation from the people around us that we, whose opinions we care about. Like that's not good or bad. So again, not, it's not binary, right? It's just a question of, are we honoring and validating our own expectations, truth, boundaries, to shout out to Lexi again, and holding ourselves to those things before expecting to hold others to them, right?
We know. How do we know? Are there some like keys? Are there some keys? Are there some cues to be able to say, oh, I'm being in my truth right now. I really trust myself. Like, how do we know that we're in that zone?
Yeah. Well, so like maybe tell me if this feels like a reasonable way to answer the question, but by transforming the question, like, how do we get to that zone? Like, how do we get to the zone of where I'm tapping into self-trust? Is that kind of a suitable question? Yeah. All right. So this is another thing that I got a variety of research on, and there's a commonality in all of it, like across multiple people that I found. So just to kind of shout them out, Kyle Cease, have you ever heard of Kyle Cease?
I haven't. No.
So he was a really successful stand-up comedian who decided that like along his path of success, it wasn't making him happy. And he decided that what he was being called to do was help people transform into the best versions of themselves, the most self-trusting versions of themselves. So he has a bunch of content, but also wrote a book. I hope I screw this up. Is like Falling in Love with Your Fears, I think is the subtitle. And then Glennon Doyle, who is a great author, podcaster of We Can Do Hard Things, that I constantly am learning so much from. But she wrote a book, Untamed, where she talks about going from that validation seeking outside of herself to the knowing place inside of herself. So all across multiple really wise, experienced people, there's something about sinking into yourself and being still in terms of the practice. So Kyle Cease, he calls it deep down. So you know how people would say like, deep down I know that da 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 da, right? Like or deep down I know that I probably shouldn't go tonight because I'm really tired, but I'm maybe worried about disappointing somebody or whatever, right? Or deep down I know that I should go to this thing, but I'm kind of anxious and would rather stay home and watch TV, right? So he's saying like, what if we live from that deep down place rather than it being a place that like we drop into, right? Like, what about the idea of living from your deep down place, right? That's one way that he kind of says it, like his truth. But and then Glennon says, so she has an interesting process where she, and I'm not advocating that people need to do this, but hey, if it helps you, then find some form of this for yourself. But she was really struggling with the decision, and she had the inclination to like poll other people's opinions and research what others have done, weigh all the pros and cons, weigh how other people would perceive her if she made this decision versus this decision. And she just hit this point where she was like, I'm just going to go into my dark closet for 10 minutes and just breathe, like detox from the stimulation and input of the world. And she found that as she did that just for 10 minutes each day for first a week, but she noticed like she described it as like she was sinking a little bit more. She was like sinking in a little bit more. So again, like going downwards, right? And eventually she found this place of stillness and just kind of stayed there. And in that place, said like she called that place like her place of knowing, the capital K, knowing. But I think it's like self-trust, right? And she said, when I'm in that place and it kind of sank into it, you can pose a question about my life or about, am I meant to do this or this or this? And her knowing gives her just a little nudge to what is the next precise thing to do. It doesn't give her the full answer, but it gives her just a nudge of what the next thing to do is. And she has to keep returning and sinking down into that place of knowing. And then she gets the next nudge once she completes the action of the first. And she described it as like a loving, playful guide. And she kind of interpreted like the reason that it only reveals the next right thing for me to do rather than the whole thing is because it actually wants me to come back again and again. It wants to do life together, right? Like this authentic, truth-based part of ourselves wants to be in relationship with the us that lives in the world. Right. And so she has a really great quote that's just, I learned that if I wanted to rise, I have to sink first. So this idea of finding quiet, being still, of like away from stimulation, away from like, the tendency to distract ourselves or to kind of numb, but like sinking into that still place. And, it takes practice, right? And just kind of asking a question and waiting. Rather than like using our brain to like figure out what the answer is, it's less about figuring out and less about paying attention and more about paying attention to what shows up in that place.
Every time you've mentioned like going down and like sinking deep into it, my interpretation of that is kind of like getting out of our brain and going more into our gut, into our intuition.
Yeah.
I think it makes sense to me that, sometimes I'm really led by my mind and my critical thinking and my cognitive aspect. Sometimes I'm really led with my heart and my emotions. What seems like a combination of those two things is our intuition. Is this ultimately about kind of creating space to be able to tap into our radically honest intuition and building trust with what that is?
Yeah. I think that building a relationship with that part of us, right? I think that the trust is a byproduct of building the relationship. Does that make sense? So
yeah.
It's not necessarily, well, and I think that that's the case, in building relationships with people outside of ourselves, right? Like we're not necessarily thinking like, I'm building trust with you. No, I'm just spending time with you and kind of being in connection in a loving, kind of appreciative way, right? And trust is the byproduct of that. And so I think that it's about finding that part of ourself and kind of gradually building a relationship with it. Yeah. I mean, I think that like, it goes back to that. It's a choice supported by action over time. Right. We can, I don't know. I think that it just sums it up so nicely, right? Like we have to make the choice that like, I'm going to spend time building this relationship and then show up, like follow through, keep that promise and do it. Right. And self-trust is a byproduct of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me personally, this is one of my favorite things about having a yoga practice, and specifically a hot yoga practice. Because when you're in there, like you have a yoga mat, a towel, because it's hot, and a water. But other than that, all of the accoutrements and accessories that like typically define us, you leave them out in the lobby because it's hot, you know? You take your makeup off and you take your rings off, you take your stuff off and you're there. And what that does over the course of a yoga class, it creates all of this space, all this opening, all of this space to be able to really like, I can feel myself breathing. I can notice my heart beating. I can feel how I'm, you know, oh, I'm anticipating 5 minutes from now. You know, so sometimes, you know, being in the closet, being in, you know, a moment of breath work or a meditation or a class, not overly complicated class that makes you have to think a lot, but like being able to like get out of your brain a little bit, get out of your heart a little bit and find that deep part. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I find, so for me, when I do this practice, it's never in a closet, right? But like, I get in touch with that part of myself sometimes when I'm taking a shower, right? I'm just like, and it's not void of stimulation, right? But it's comforting stimulation, you know, when it's warm and kind of the, you know, it hitting my back and things like that. And, you know, I have some epiphany or eureka moments, you know, where something just becomes clear to me. Right. So there's, you know, even in that sense, there is like that kind of sinking into the body out of the mind. And then, you know, other times it's through meditation, but other times it's through just doing some creative task that I've done a thousand times before. Right. Or going for the same, you know, same walk that I've done so many times. Right. That it's a little bit automated, but it's like kind of like a ritual. And sometimes in that space, it like, whatever, whether I'm sinking down or whether the thing rises up. Yeah, you know, that's those are just like kind of other situations that where it shows up for me. It sounds like for you in the yoga room and
yeah, and it's becoming abundantly more clear the more we talk how in some areas of my life and my career, I've got that. And in other areas, I'm like, oh, I need to start applying this to over there because I don't use my intuition. I don't really trust myself. But over there, like I'm really good at it for whatever reason.
yeah, I think that people often, and you know, I'm guilty of this too, is like we kind of know what our anxious tendencies are. And so like particularly when we're in relation to other people, we are feeling all of those anxious tendencies, but trying to keep it out of the relationship space. We're trying to kind of hide it or hide that part of ourselves in some way. And I think that like the demonstration of self-trust is like, yeah, that part is anxious and you know, whatever, but that doesn't mean that it's bad, right? It's again, it's providing information, and it might be information saying, you know, this business partnership isn't right, or it might be like it's coming from somewhere, and it's really important to spend time like validating its like presence and worthiness of like showing of being there with you. But I mean, this is one of the things that's so hard. I think it's, you know, like how do we know the difference between whether we're following like our deep down knowing or being led by our more anxious part, right? And I think if I had to like put my finger on it, like for me, it feels like the difference between those two things is how loud or like repetitive the voice or the thought feels. If it feels really present, if it's taking up a lot of real estate in my mind, if it's like on a loop, okay, this is an anxious part, right? If I'm feeling relief when I carry out what the thought is saying, probably anxious part, right? But when it's kind of that whisper that I have to get still and sink into to hear, right? But and also always there, right? But it's like always there, just really, really quiet. That's the thing. Like that's the knowing. It's not, you know, trying to get my attention by like, you know, or it's not trying to get my attention in my mind. The way that it, you know, this just occurred to me, the way that it maybe is trying to get my attention is like, you know, I'm going to let you follow all your anxiety stuff and let you find out that that's not where your peace comes from. Like, I'll be here when you're ready, kind of thing.
Yep.
It's like really gentle and really allows us to live our life like, you know, with, you know, anxiety or whatever. And it's like, I'm here when you're ready.
Leads me to think that radical honesty really makes you wonder, are we truthfully confident, or are we kind of ignorant maybe to our abilities? I think about my mom often in this context because her and my stepfather are in their 80s and they have an RV, like this giant tour bus that they ride around in a couple months out of the year. So to drive an RV, like there's no special training. There's no special license that you have to have. This is like a Greyhound bus,
Yeah.
And as we get older, like our reflexes and our vision, everything's going to decline a little bit. So I'm wondering, is it, I really trust myself to drive this RV as an 83-year-old man down the highway doing 100 miles an hour? Or is that kind of a lack of awareness of being like, maybe I shouldn't really trust myself in this situation? Does our kind of our bravado or our false confidence or maybe our lack of self-awareness can lead to like maybe a fake self-trust? Because I want to pull her aside and be like, hey, Mom, just as a gentle reminder, I ride a motorcycle. You know what I mean? You got cataracts, you're 84 in this giant thing. Like the chances of you going a little bit over the yellow line into my lane are pretty high.
Yeah.
Pretty high.
Yeah. I hear you. And I mean, I think that it would require him or your mom to sink into that place of like, radical truth of like, am I actually seeing the road well, or am I protecting myself from my aging and how it makes me sad and, or whatever. Right. Yeah. And that's something that they can kind of only know. Right. And that eventually behavior reveals, right? Like hopefully they don't get in an accident, Godspeed.
Yeah. I witness it all the time too, just on like a daily pedestrian level. I witness it all the time. Somebody walks into the studio who's like, scared. I can't do I can't do hot yoga, And then they take class and they come out and like the fear is gone. It was all happy and fun and joyful. And suddenly they have this trust they can do more challenging things simply because they went over the precipice of anxiety and did it and went to it. You built up this thing, 9 times out of 10, if I say, hey, you should come to hot yoga class, I can't be in the heat. I'm not flexible. I'm not, I'll be like, well, she's 84 years old and she's 7 and we're doing this class and everybody else is in between 30s, 40s, 50s, tall, short, it doesn't matter. Like you can do it. Maybe sometimes it's about like jumping off the edge and, going for something maybe you thought you couldn't do.
Yeah, well, and I mean, this is kind of back to the beginning of our conversation in some ways of self-trust includes faith that I can do this thing and pivot if I need to. And like faith, confidence, belief and knowing, I think you had said. Those are the kind of 4 words that we said if they had a baby, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, what you're kind of pointing out through this example is we frequently are hiding our truth from ourselves or let me say it this way, we're protecting ourselves from things that make us afraid or that feel risky or that are unknown to us. And again, like at some point we're going to do a full episode or maybe more on anxiety, but like that is and in our society we are trained to be left-brained, right? Like, and that's where our anxiety comes from. I don't know if you've experienced anxiety that didn't have a thought associated with it. Typically, probably never, right? Like when we have a feeling in our body and are afraid, that's fear. That's something different, right? But fear passes usually without, like conscious thought, right? Like we're just in it or whatever. And so, yeah, I mean, so I think that anxiety and the ways that we hide things from ourselves definitely impact our self-trust, right? And that's may not show up for us in that moment that we're protecting ourselves, but we will find that in a later moment, in something that could require self-trust, it's not going to be there.
Yeah. The beautiful part about all of this is we have no idea. Like I can trust myself to make the decision to go left or to go right, but 100 yards down the trail, like you have no idea what's going to happen. That's an
Yeah.
easy way, I think, for me to like build up and nurture and keep it going with my own self-trust, knowing that I don't know. I have no idea.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great point that like even even when we can see what looks like the easier to walk path, like maybe it's paved and flowers and grassy, just over the hill might be like Doomsday Town. And the graveyard looking path that we have to walk through just over the hill might be a field of flowers and whatever, right? Like so we like to take guesses that what we can see is what we can expect. And that's true to some degree, but we generalize it. It's like, oh yeah, over the hill is the same thing, right? Or
Well,
beyond the horizon is the same thing as what's in front of it.
yeah.
Yeah.
This has been super helpful for me because I know, again, in some areas, like, oh, I'm so good at that. And in some areas, like, I really need to work on, you know,
Yeah, well, what comes to mind in terms of the areas that you have self-trust, that you feel confidence and that you've been able to lead? I know you said a little bit about it before.
yeah. I mean, for me, there's like five things in my life that I'm very, very interested in. Five different topics: gardening, music, yoga, things like that.
Mhm.
Things that I like research and I'm into. And if I were to have to make a decision about something, like, all right, I feel like I have some experience, backing me up into this thing. Yeah, so in some areas it's relatively easy. Like, for example, I have three motorcycles. I ride a motorcycle every single day. Like, how do I choose which bike I'm going to ride on any given day? And it's 100% intuition. I don't think about it. And I also don't go the same way every day to work. If my intuition says go left instead of right, I try to go left faster than my brain can like get me out of it. Using my intuition to like guide me in certain areas. But then in other areas, when it comes to like, what's the schedule going to be at the studio? Am I going to relocate? I'm going to do all of this stuff. I end up just like percolating on it. And then months or a year could go by and nothing's really happened because I don't trust myself in that arena like I did over here.
Yeah. Yeah. I know for me, like one thing that I trust myself with is to be kind of endlessly curious about myself. And I think that that has served me really well because it actually ties into one of the pillars of like deeply knowing myself, right? I think that that is of the kind of compass points, as she says, like that is the one that I've been able to lean on the most. And I've had to work really hard to build self-trust in the areas of radical honesty, which I think everybody does, as we said, right? Like just our brains are programmed to hide hard things from us in our subconscious. And so that's one that the radical honesty is something that I've really had to work towards following through. I know we've talked about like both of us have ADHD. And so like being able to follow through on things and keep promises and not be swayed by kind of the impulse in the moment or whatever is another one I've had to really work at. And I think the one that I've had to work at the most, particularly in the relationship area, is the regulation point of the compass of like calming my nervous system. But I can only do that once I deeply know what's there, right? And so I did a lot of therapy years ago in terms of like knowing myself deeply, but in terms of getting my nervous system on board for self-trust, that took a lot more. And so as a result, one of the hard things that I encountered in a relationship history was finding myself kind of feeling anxious and insecure and kind of numbing that, right? Rather than bringing it to the person um, or I would kind of, avoid or withdraw that, from the relationship to ease that feeling. And I also stayed in, there's relationships where I stayed there too long because I wanted to feel, the goal was, or I thought the fear was, if I am not in this relationship, how will I experience connection? Right. And I lacked the self-trust and really the connection with that part of me, right? Like that that truth part of me, that knowing part of me of like, you'll be okay. Right. I
Mhm.
had to actually develop a relationship with that part first before I could feel confident enough to even evaluate relationships or dating partners or whatever. Um, and now, now I've been married for a few years and have a very different type of relationship because of that work, which feels really great. And, I feel really good about. It's hard though. It's ongoing, right? Like I have to keep showing up with that part of myself and keep showing up for that part of myself, even in my current relationship. So I don't want people to think that like it necessarily you get to a point where you don't have to deal with this part of yourself anymore. Like the whole idea is like when I have a relationship with this part of myself, as hard as it is to get that relationship back, like life gets easier. Right? Life gets simpler. The hard work is kind of upfront of like that, again, radical honesty. Like, how do I, like, do I actually use some strategies to calm my nervous system? Right? Am I powering through something or am I pausing and taking some deep breaths or, you know, going to do something creative or being out in nature or, those kind of natural things that will get you there?
Yeah, I can think of like 6 or 7 of the podcasts that we like just released within the last couple of months that are like all kind of like integrated into all of what we're talking about right now. Sometimes I feel, I know this might resonate with some listeners. Sometimes I feel a little bit overwhelmed because it's endless work. There is no getting there. It's this constant. It's going to be this constant thing. And as soon as I think that I know what I'm talking about, I'm like, oh, I have no idea. I'm right on. I know 1% of where I need to keep going and keep going and keep going and keep going and keep going. But I love too how it's kind of all evergreen. It's all interconnected. Like that episode relates to this one, which is the foundation for this one. And the next
Mm.
one we're going to do, be able to look back and be like, oh, that's going to nurture your self trust. And, all go, it's just more tools in our tool bag.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, so one of the things that I want to make sure that we get to is like, you and I would say so many people from our generation and certainly the next generation, like, why does it seem like so many people are lacking self-trust in our society and are being led by external validation as the kind of, the be all end all? And so I want to so any parents that are listening, I just want them to have some takeaways of like, how do we create kids who have an easier time channeling self-trust? That's something that I'm like passionate about.
It's your work, it's your career, and that's your daily, every day.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a huge part of it. And even as a parent, like, it's something that I integrate into my parenting too, as much as I can, or as much as I can remember to. Um, so all right, so parenting to build a foundation of self-trust in kids has so much to do with reflecting a child's experience with validation, not deflecting their experience. So let me give you an example of what that looks like. A kid hears a big noise, right? That they don't know what it is. And they have their eyes get alert and they kind of turn towards it. And rather than saying, like, don't worry about it, like, that was nothing, being like, that felt really scary, huh? Like, that big noise, you heard a big noise and that felt kind of scary. You noticed that big noise, right? And then saying, that big noise is, a truck going down the street or an airplane or something like that. We're safe. Right. But like reflecting back what their experience of it was, because when we don't do that, when we're instead like, it's not a big deal. Just, don't worry about that. Right. What we're doing, like their body definitely noticed something. Right. And if we tell them not a big deal, then it's like, so I shouldn't trust my noticing of things with my body. Right. I shouldn't trust the things that I am paying attention to. And like, God forbid, like we actually want for our kids to be able to tune into their body feelings of safety, not so much in an anxious way, but in a like, I'm noticing what's going on in my surroundings and I'm paying attention rather than believing that I can't trust myself. Like we want them to have some gut instinct and intuition that might protect them in, situations with peers, or even if they like travel somewhere without us, right? Like it's really important to not train that stuff out of them. So it could be like, oh, that felt really scary, huh? Or like, they stub their toe, or they, like bonk their head on something, but it's, we know that it's probably not that bad or whatever, rather than being like, you're fine, right? Or like, that didn't hurt, get up, right? It's like, that hurt, huh? It's going to be like validating of their experience of like, that did hurt. I can trust that my body is telling me what happened, right? Like, you paid attention to your body. And it can, and here's the hard one, right? When parents are, and I face this with my 2.5-year-old, a lot these days because she's 2.5. But so, when she's potty training and we want her to try to use the potty as much as possible because we want to avoid accidents and things like that. And she's killing it. She's doing great. But there are times where we're going out somewhere and we're like, we want you to try the potty before we go out so that, and we're not saying this, but like, so that you don't pee in the car seat, or like, so that you don't pee in the store, right? Like this is us behind the scenes, or, and I don't want to. And so what we've been trying to do is like, okay, you don't want to check in with your body. Do you feel any pee-pee in your belly? Or do you feel like you have to go like in your belly? And she says no. We respond, okay, you know your body best, right? To let her know, like, your body is telling you something that you can trust. That's where it starts. It starts in these, like, I mean, I remember my daughter, we live in a house where there's like vents, is the way that the air circulates. And when she was much younger, when a vent would come on, she would tune into it kind of with those wide eyes, or like, but then like look at me to see how I'm reacting. And if I can react calmly and say, that's the vent, nice noticing. You really noticed that sound, didn't you? Then she's going to start to build this trust of like the information that my 5 senses and others are giving me, are trustworthy. I can trust that what my body is like sensing, literally, is actual information.
Wow. That was awesome. We're going to earmark that and make that a reel. That was really great. I mean, that seems like a revolution, and I'm not in that world that you're in. It's not my career. But boy, did I grow up differently than that. Suck it up, kid. There's no, it's just, I just grew up in a different way. There was no validation of, quit your crying. It's only a truck going down the street.
Yeah, right.
Nothing to be concerned about.
Quit your crying, I don't know, like the fish took your worm. It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, it's a big deal to me. Right. Like, yeah. And so, I mean, so it can come in that form. It can come in the quit your crying form, but it can also even come in the form of like the parent not being able to contain and like handle the kid's distress without becoming distressed themselves. So that can also trigger, you're fine, right? Or it's not a big deal, it's okay, right? From a more anxious place rather than like a more maybe frustrated place or whatever. But that also is going to invalidate the self-trust.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, how would you know as a parent, like if you grew up a certain way and your parents grew up a certain way, like repeated things remembered and remembered things repeated, it's going to keep cycling down.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the things that I'm passionately curious about and kind of, just like, just passionate about, right, is this kind of stuff. And, where I get some of this information is my intuition, my deep down knowing, but also it would be a shame for me not to credit like my main source, who is, and I've shouted her out on other podcasts, but Dr. Becky Kennedy. She's a parenting psychologist, and she wrote the book Good Inside, which, like, if you're going to read one parenting book, that's the one.
Yeah.
I mean, like that's the one. And she also has, she's a content provider. She's on like Instagram and Facebook, and she has her own podcast, the Good Inside podcast. But like it's not anybody's fault for not having this information or not knowing it. But like, we can get some really like, I forget if I said this on the podcast before, but like those early years, like that's where stuff from like the parents gets stuck in kids. And we have some really kind of, that can be scary. That can be a scary thing. But like we also have a real opportunity to get some wonderful stuff stuck, like self-trust.
Yeah.
Right. So,
which would make it significantly easier when you're my age to try to figure it out because you already have like a nice foundation.
Right.
It
like
could have been eroded, you could have been eroded over the years from culture and society and all that, but you have a foundation.
It's where your anchor is, right? We said it before. It's like where our anchor is, so we keep like drifting back to it, right? Yeah, no matter how stormy the sea is, like we keep drifting back to that place.
Yeah. That was a beautiful moment right there. Really, I think that's a culmination of the Level Up Guys podcast, why we do it, taking our intuition and our experience and our wisdom of our own experiences and all these different resources, the Becky Kennedys of the world, taking all we know and trying to like bring it all in a one digestible thing for everybody to listen to and watch and interact with and to level up their own lives. Yeah. Wow.
I'm with you. Yeah.
Love it.
All right. So people, you know what to do. You're going to follow us. You're going to click subscribe and like and spread the word and 5-star reviews, write a written review if you can. But most importantly, just if you like the episodes, just share them with somebody who you think needs to hear them or would enjoy hearing them. That's going to be the most important thing. We want you to be force of leveling up in the world, and we need your help.
Let's go. All right. I love you, Jarrett. Till next time.
All right. Love you too, buddy.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
That's it for today, you guys. Make sure to follow us. You can find us on all the major platforms. If you really like what you heard, maybe share it with a friend, share it with a buddy, maybe share it with an enemy, because we all need a little bit of love. We're going to level up together. See you next time.